Hey everyone, welcome to my first ever Instagram Live. I'm Melanie Krumrey and I'm here in Austin, Texas. And today I'm eager to introduce you to my friend Laura Wilcox, who lives in Houston, Texas, although I think she is in Galveston today enjoying a couple days at the beach, which I'm happy for her about. Laura And so many of you who I'm friends with here on Instagram came to my mind as I was reading through it this week. So I'm just really excited to share it with you today. So I first met Laura when we were both students at the University of Texas back in the day, when I signed up to join a 4-week Bible study through the campus ministry of Cru. I was in desperate need of mentorship and someone to help me understand my own faith, and I thank God for giving me the gift of Laura right at the time I most needed her. Not only did she teach me the basics of the Christian faith, how to study the Bible, how to share the gospel, she helped me reflect on my own life and understand exactly when it was that God had granted me my own salvation in Christ. I still treasure the times that we sat on my dorm room floor studying the Book of Philippians with a few other girls. And then I treasure our many, many one-on-one conversations at the Student Union at the University of Texas. I can't even fully express what Laura means to me and how influential she has been in my life, which is another reason I'm just truly honored to share her with you today. Currently, Laura is the founder and president of what's called Sacred Stories Ministries, which is a really cool ministry that encourages women to share bravely about God's faithfulness in their own lives through writing their own Christ-centered stories of hope. I have participated in this and read many of these stories, and I am just encouraged every time. I would encourage you to find her here on Instagram, Facebook. She has her own website. We'll talk about that later. Laura is also a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary, where she received her master's degree in biblical studies, and she's written 2 other books before this one. So anyway, I don't want to wait any longer. I'm going to ask Laura to join us now. If I can figure that out. Let's see. Hang on just a sec. All right. Okay. There she is. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Melanie. Good to see you.
It's you. How are you at the beach? How are you? Where are you?
Yes. Okay. So I'm in Galveston enjoying some R&R. Yes, it's wonderful. Vitamin D all the way. And and the ocean is just always a gift from God to be there and watch the waves and think of his power.
Oh, totally. That's so great. Hey, so do you remember those days at UT?
Okay, yes. As you were talking right before I joined, I was thinking, oh, we had our Bibles, and you were the hostess. You opened up your dorm room, and you were willing to let us in and let me into your life, and it was such a gift to walk and to continue to walk alongside you, sister, and to see how God has just brought so much fruit through your surrender. And but I do remember that we were both kind of finding our way. I had become a believer just within the last year or two of when I met you. So I was finding my way, and your encouragement, you have the gift of encouragement. And that was such a gift to me, is that you were an encourager in that process of me stepping out to lead and to disciple.
Well, I was shocked when I found out that you had just recently become a believer because I never would have known that. God gave you instant growth and the ability to really shepherd me. So I'm so grateful for that.
Well, the honor is mine because I look at your life and all that God has done and so many lives that you've impacted and how you've lived your story with faith and surrender and how you've impacted Sacred Story by, being willing to share some of your hard times and some things that you've walked through.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, I want these guys to get to know you a little bit. So, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us what led you to write this book?
Sure, yeah. So I am a graduate at the University of Texas in marketing and actually became a follower of Jesus there, as I just mentioned. And so I continue to be amazed at his beauty and the way that he is the author of my story and our stories. And so I'm a listener and lover of story, as you can imagine. In seminary, I actually love church history, and I wrote a Bible study after I graduated from seminary, where I placed it's called Capture My Heart, Lord, and I placed the stories of women in church history in that book, so I can see how God has designed all of us to be people who live story and love story, and yet I see how He's given me a great desire to give um, other women who have followed Him, no matter if it's in our real time or in history, the ability to share how they've walked it out, and as well as men. I think that it was so encouraging to hear the stories of men when I was in seminary, and just know that we have a great legacy. We have the cloud of witnesses around us. And so I love to create. That's part of the reasons why I created Sacred Story is at heart, I think we're all a creator in many ways. God's put that in us, but I love creating something that can be an offering to the Lord. And that's what I see Sacred Story as, and something that can make be useful and encouraging to others. And that's part of the reason why I wrote Beautiful Surrender. um, so yes, because I have walked out singleness, and there are seasons of loss and suffering that we'll talk about, but there's also joy and adventure. So I wrote it as a way to share a bit more of my story, but also bring forward a book of the Bible that is an amazing, beautiful, incredible short story.
Hmm. It is such a great story. I love it. And I did your first book, Capture My Heart, and I just love
Yes.
that. It's been a while, but I remember just really loving those stories from church history about women. So, uh,
Yes. I'm going to sit down with them in heaven and have a tea party, and everyone's invited. So we can all share more about our stories.
yes. Oh, well, I'm definitely joining. Okay, well, talk to us a little bit about the title, Beautiful Surrender. So I love that. I think to some, though, the word surrender might sound like defeat or giving up, but I don't think that's the sense in which you mean it at all. So just tell us about the title.
Yes. Okay, so we talk about the Book of Ruth, and we see that in Ruth, she is laying down some dreams. She's gone through some grief. So has her mother-in-law, Naomi. And we see that there's unexpected turns. I would say probably we all have unexpected turns, including this book of the Bible. We see that, and I'm sure that Boaz had an unexpected turn in the way he wasn't prepared to marry a woman. I'm sure that was a Moabite. That was seen as a little bit scandalous in those days. And so beautiful is what God does. It's the beauty of the gospel, the beauty that Christ is the center of our story, that he can make something beautiful out of it, even out of the ashes that we walk through, and the things that we wish we didn't have, and the things that we wish that we did have. So either way, we have things we wish we didn't have, and we have things we wish we did have. But either way, he can bring beauty out of the ashes. And I think that, yes, it can look like defeat, to be honest with you, and it can feel like defeat. I think Jesus and his followers, they thought that he was defeated. The enemy, our spiritual enemy, Satan, thought that he had done a good job, and had defeated Jesus by putting him to death on the cross. And so there is a sense where surrender can have an element of feeling defeated, but the beautiful thing of it is, even when feeling defeated and set back and confused and abandoned, there's a joy. There can be a joy on the other side and a victory on the other side that would not be there without the surrender and even walking through whatever seems dark in our story, whatever we can't make sense out of. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful surrender that will not only touch our lives and make us more into the people God created us to be, but then it will impact the generations. But we can't see that sometimes when we're walking it out. Obviously, Jesus knew his destiny, and yet he had to surrender. And so it points back to the gospel.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Okay, you have formatted this Bible study. It is truly not just a book. You can work in the book. There's questions asked, and you laid it out in a certain format, which you call the Inductive Bible Study Method. So I think some people watching might know already exactly what that is, but I hoped you could explain that a little bit and why you chose to format the book this way.
Sure. Yeah, I love the inductive method. It is just a very basic way that has been tried and true to study the scripture. And it is a way to think about it no matter if you're going through a prepared study or going through it yourself. So this will get our minds thinking about, what do I see? What's there? What does it mean, and how do I apply it to my life? And so this has been life-changing for me. It's an intentional way to study the Bible. I know sometimes I come to the Bible and I'm lazy. I just read it and think, oh, I've read that verse. Okay, yeah, I know. And the inductive study is it pushes through our laziness or our resistance or whatever it may be, and helps us to think more clearly about what's being said, about what it means, and how to apply it to our lives.
Yeah, exactly. I love that format, and just reading through some of the questions. Although I haven't started actually writing in my workbook, it was already causing me to think differently and freshly about the story of Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that challenge to actually think and not take it for granted that I know this story well. So, okay, so along with this inductive Bible study method through the Book of Ruth, you've also included 23 stories, real life stories. They're personal. Some of them are really raw and real stories from individual women in the book. So 23 stories. So how did you decide to do that? I know we have a little hint because this is what your ministry is about. And what can women who go through this study expect to hear in these stories?
Yes, it does go along with the mission of Sacred Story. Is we want to showcase God's faithfulness and how truth is lived out. Not just be told about truth, but also how is this lived out? And we know that, as I said, God's put in our heart a desire to impart. And so what I found is men and women want to impart by sharing how God's been faithful to them. I actually started collecting these stories about how women met and eventually married when I launched Sacred Story. And I wasn't sure where these stories would eventually go, and God showed us over time. But there are also stories at the end of each session of women who are continuing to work out and live out their singleness, and there's not not yet, or it's still just they're walking out their journey of singleness. The stories in the back are women who did walk out romance, dating, heartbreak, insecurity, and they eventually married. And so you have 6 stories of women who are continuing to walk out their singleness. And yes, there is pain in some of those stories, unexpected devastation, unexpected turns that mean that they're devastated that their marriage actually ended and they're single again. And then the stories in the back are a great variety. That's what I love, that we can hear from women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and up about how they continue to process their story, and whether we all have dreams and things that we lay on the altar. And so whatever that looks like in every season of life, and that's my hope, is that it brings encouragement and also brings a greater desire and motivation to depend on the Lord, because if this sister can do it, if this sister walked through this, and no matter what this is, and this sister sees the redemption on the other side, I'm going to trust God that there's redemption on the other side of my story and that he's sovereign.
Okay, well, you've given me a great bridge to my next question, which is, I wanted to see if you would talk a little bit about your own singleness, your own journey with the Lord in singleness, and how maybe you learned new things by going through the Book of Ruth and actually writing this study with this lens.
Yes, I think that I'm always a learner and I'm a learner alongside all of us. And so that's what I love about writing material and getting to dig in for myself. And so, you know, I had not studied Ruth from the lens of like, okay, so let's think about how she was married, lost her husband, single, living with her mother-in-law, having had been infertile, no kids. So it was thinking more about her heart as a woman and what she was walking through. And then thinking about that in my life, who are people around me that God's called me to sacrifice for? And she was sacrificing for Naomi to go back and be a companion to her, a comfort to her. And so who is there in my life? Maybe and maybe it's not the way that I felt like the person I would even want to sacrifice for, or the people I'd want to sacrifice for. But in the end, I do, because the Spirit of God gives me that joy as a result of sacrificing. But I thought about people in my life that God had called me to sacrifice for and walk alongside. And I thought about timing. It's always timing. And so, and I know that, but it was another encouragement about his timing and about the fact that our stories are meant to impact the generations. And it was a fresh reminder to me that, yes, we walk through different seasons, but in the end, we can live a story that makes an impact in the generations and goes far beyond our lifetime. And that's what happened with Ruth. And they didn't know when they were walking the dusty roads back to Bethlehem, having nobody that was expecting them, having no idea how they would earn income, having nothing. And really, I mean, except they did, they had lived there, Naomi had lived there, so she had some connections, but little did they know that God would end up writing a beautiful story of being in the lineage of the Redeemer who would come. And so it was just a reminder to me that there's so much more at stake in my story than I realize. And in our stories, there's so much more at stake, and the enemy wants to steal that away. And I also am reminded about the creativity of God. So in my stage of life, I'm in my 50s, I can think, oh gosh, there's no more guys left, or, whatever, they've all married. Um, or I can feel like, it seems hard. It seems hard for God to find, to bring someone forward, but, he's creative and he's powerful, and it just takes one. And it's a good reminder that, yes, that he is able to bring forward in his timing. And I love his creativity, and I think that it's gave me an openness to maybe consider ways he might write my story, to continue to open my hand to how he might write my story, and will continue to write my story, whether single or married. Just an openness to keep my hand open, because he's the one who gives me joy on the other side of surrender. There is a pain and a giving up to surrender, but then there's, as we talked about, there's a joy, there's an adventure, there's a great fruit that comes from it.
Absolutely. I think you and I both have a lot of stories about God's creativity in the lives of people that we know. He truly has this all timed, and in his sovereignty, it is for our good and his glory. And it's amazing to watch.
Yes, okay, so that's one thing I was like, I need to ask Melanie about your journey, because I know that you've seen many women walk through singleness. You've ministered to them, having been, and you are a pastor's wife with college students, right? Being one of the
Yeah.
main attendees. And so tell us a little bit about how you have encouraged women to find fulfillment in singleness, and also how to prepare for marriage.
Oh, yeah. We talked about this earlier, but I think my husband and I have been to well over 100 weddings, him performing most of those ceremonies. So we've gotten this really awesome front row um, seat at these love stories that God ordains playing out. And so I just have loved the whole process, like having coffee with the single women who are um, hopeful and desiring marriage and family, and then the newly married women who are working that all out, with dreams fulfilled or not. Sometimes it's not all that they expected, and so many conversations about that as well. But lots of time with single women, and this is why I kept thinking of so many of the women that I'm friends with here as I was reading through your study, because I think I've seen, and I think you have too, it can go two ways, and often there's these seasons of those two extremes where a single woman might be just fully living out 1 Corinthians 7. The single woman she's free to serve the Lord, and she's just really thriving in her relationship with the Lord, her walk with him, her service unto him, her involvement in church and ministry, and just like you talked about, serving and sacrificing on behalf of others. And then I guess the opposite and negative extreme would be those who are just kind of pining, and just really in the lows of being single, and that's kind of overshadowing everything, and waiting for when I get married, and if only I was married. So those conversations are harder because you do have to talk about the surrender, and how it can be a very beautiful thing, and that those years can be offered up to God as an offering, as a sacrifice, as an opportunity to serve him like you might not be able to do any other time in your life, especially if you're married, have children. So I've seen it all, and I'm especially encouraged by those who are living out their singleness, as I've watched you do all these years, just serving the Lord, serving the people around them, using those years of singleness and the freedom that singleness brings to grow. So it's been a privilege. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a privilege to see your journey too. And 100 weddings. Wow, that's over 100.
Yeah. One summer, this is the record. One summer we got invited to 13 weddings. We went to 10 of those, which if you think about a summer between school years, that's almost every weekend. And my husband performed 7 or 8 of those ceremonies. So we thought about making t-shirts like Wedding for 2010 or whenever that was, but it was really fun and really intense. And I had to buy a lot of TJ Maxx and Target dresses so that I could,
Yeah.
different.
Have a variety. You're not showing up in the same one every time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so speaking of marriage, did doing this study, writing this, did it change your perspective on marriage at all, or give you any new insights regarding that?
I think the reminders that I mentioned about where our security is truly found and where our worth is found. I think that women in general, we struggle with putting worth in how we look, how we perform, what is our reputation. And so Ruth was, the culture would have said, go back and go to the secure place where you can find a husband. And so I think it's a reminder that that our security is not in what our culture says it will be. And even though I've been online, I've been set up, I've been to seminary, it's our security is in who Jesus is in his story that he's writing for us. And I wouldn't trade my journey of singleness I wouldn't trade it. There have been seasons of loss, but I can see how God has brought redemption in ways that I could never have imagined, and fruit. So for me, because I'm in my fifth decade, I can see more of that. I think it's harder when you're younger, and yet we live by faith. And so my co-author who wrote along with me, Caitlin Wurzbach, who's an amazing sister in Christ. So Caitlin went through a broken engagement right after she graduated from college, and ended up marrying about 4 to 5 years later, and is so dear. So I love having her perspective too, of going through a broken heart. And So yeah, I think that it was a reminder about the qualities that we can look for in a worthy man is what it's called, is what Boaz is called, and that all that is a fresh renewing. Because if we're not renewed in our minds about whether it's singleness or anything that women walk through, finances, health issue, marriage, if we're not renewed in our minds, we can easily start grabbing onto the ways of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, will you talk about, because this isn't necessarily just a book for single women, so what do you think the benefits are for both the single woman and the married woman? Why would it be an encouragement to both?
Yeah, so we wrote the study so that single women and married women could get a lot out of it. And the way that came about is the woman who helped me edit it, who's one of my colleagues at Sacred Story, she was editing it for me, and she's married and has several kids. And she said, "You know what? I resonate with a lot of this because these are women's sort of journeys, women's things that are part of our hearts." And so then we said, well, let's make a study so that if a married woman wants to study with a single woman or have a group of mixture, some of the application does focus on marriage and dating, but what we need to do is we need to hear from each other. And there are plenty of application that focuses whether you're married or single, because surrender is something that continues throughout our whole story. I mean, and so I encourage women, both married and single, to study together.
Okay.
And I think sometimes my married friends are like, I don't know what to do anymore, or like we can feel like helpless when we have friends going through a struggle like singleness or maybe infertility or something like that. And so the study is meant to be a gift to women. Either a married woman could encourage a single woman, or a single woman could walk through it together and say, help me understand more how you walk through. And now on the other side of marriage, what are some things that you can share with me that I can be prayerful about and aware of.
Yeah, I love that. I do think it's important. Yeah, I've seen also, and probably myself included, married women forget what it's like and be a little out of touch with what our single sisters are going through. And so, reading some of the personal stories in the book was just a super encouragement to me and a way to remember and to just have compassion for one another in the various highs and lows of both singleness and marriage, which I think we forget too that both are callings from the Lord, whether it be for a season or for our whole life. And so I think we've tended to showcase marriage and pour resources into building up marriages. And so I love that this is building up the single woman and also helping married women and single women come together and talk about the struggles we share in common and the struggles that are different but that we can support each other in. So I too, just having read through it, just a read through would really encourage both to do it. I know both would be blessed and encouraged.
Mm.
Um, just as we're finishing up here, just tell us what has been your prayer for the book as you were writing it. What was on your mind? What were you praying would be the outcome, or how God would use this? And you may have already touched on it, so but it's okay if you want to just repeat. I just love to hear what your prayer was.
Yes, I think a fresh resource about living the single journey and embracing the adventure. And so I wanted a fresh word for single women and about the hope we have of our God hearing our prayers, fulfilling them, and but also being the one who can sustain us no matter what, being the one who is the source of our satisfaction and our sense of worth and our security, and finding great delight in that and being refreshed to remember that and to see how other sisters are trusting him, including Ruth, and Naomi, seeing how they were trusting him. And so I think my prayer, as well as for women who attend Sacred Story retreats, is always for refreshment. We just, I'll just say, Lord, blow a fresh wind of refreshment. And that's how I feel about this study, especially in the area of singleness and marriage, and helping we as women being together in that with each other. And I would also say that to remember that God is writing an individual story in each of our lives, and it has intricacies. It's got people, places. He's intricate. There's nothing that he's not aware of. And so I'm hopeful this study will bring that to our attention again, and just build our faith. And so that we can keep trusting him and depending on him in our own story. I need that. And I also, and as I said earlier, but one of the things that I pray will come from the study is just that there's a reward to surrender. It's not, there's reward, and God has built that in to following him. Again, no matter what our story entails, but especially, looking at singleness, there is a reward to being, offering it up to him, and God can bring it about so that it's far beyond our lifetime, which is amazing to me. So.
Truly amazing that, like you said before, Ruth had no idea her story would echo into 2022 and be an encouragement to so many, so many women. And so that's what you've written about, and it's just really wonderful. So tell us where women can find the book and find you. And I think you might have some upcoming things associated with the book, and I'd love for you to tell us about those.
Yes, so women can find the book on Amazon, Beautiful Surrender, Singleness and Marriage in the Book of Ruth. And it makes my heart so happy, Melanie, to hear that you've already worked through some of the study and gained from your experience, because I would sit and listen to you teach all day. So I'm honored that you feel like God's met you so far in that. And I also wanted to mention that we're going to have some podcast conversations released this summer. So some of the women who submitted their story, you can listen by audio to the podcast, and that way you can get to know some of the women better. And I will have a conversation with my co-author, Caitlin, and I will talk about the study, and that's all to come. We also will have an international highlight on our podcast about the Ukraine and a young woman who serves there. So you won't want to miss this batch of podcasts. There's 5 conversations coming out. So the best way to follow us is to continue, if you haven't followed us already, on Instagram at Sacred Story Ministries. And then you can follow me at Laura Wilcox 7. And those are some things that I would just hopeful that and prayerful that they will continue to be a great encouragement.
And how do we find the podcast?
Yes, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can look up the Sacred Story podcast, and it has our blue logo, and it says Sacred Story with Laura Wilcox. So okay. You can also search for my name as well. So.
And what about you? Are you available to teach or speak to women's groups or things like that?
Yes, I enjoy that, and I have done that over the years, and that's always a huge blessing. So yes, I would love to visit with anyone who has a heart to see if we might connect messages, or some messages I could bring would be encouraging to women and to congregations or churches. So.
And I suppose someone could just send you a message on Instagram, or they could get in touch with me and I could tell them how to get in touch with you. But if anyone did, we'd love to help you have Laura come and speak about these things.
And so my email address is actually Laura at sacredstoryministries.org. So sacred story being single, and then ministries being plural.org.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And then I have a final question for you that I think people might enjoy hearing, especially our girlfriends joining us today. But that is, I would love it if you would tell us who or what are the non-negotiables, or what are your top desires in your maybe future Boaz?
Yeah, that's a fun question. And, I go through seasons where I think about it more than others. And yet I have seen some beautiful beautiful marriages over. So it's fun to see the marriages that and so many marriages that I celebrate around me. I would say, so my ideal Boaz, of course, loves and adores Jesus, wants to lift up his beauty above everything else, wants to serve and sacrifice for him. And I know that if he wants to serve and sacrifice for him, that will automatically bleed over into our relationship. And then someone who can nerd out on theology. I like theology. I like talking church history. I like talking about God's work in the Muslim world internationally. So it's fun to have someone who could at least enter into those conversations. And yeah, like I see Boaz, he was a worthy man who protected Ruth, who anticipated her needs, who trusted God, who was willing to see that he might have entered into a marriage he didn't expect. Like we talked about, he's marrying a Moabite woman who that was not necessarily the coolest thing. And so, I feel like whatever are my weaknesses, that my husband, my Boaz, would protect those areas and help me grow and build me up and that way I can be more myself with him instead of feeling like I have to hide and be more, I can just be myself and be free around. And of course, laughter and chocolate he doesn't have to like chocolate, but if he can, give me some chocolate or, if he can, anyway, so those kind of things are just what I would hope for and pray for. And if anyone's listening knows some men that out there that they want to set me up with. I just had a friend getting married this weekend, and she's about my age, and she's marrying because she said to someone, don't forget, if you meet someone, remember I'm available. And so this person indeed connected her to this guy, and they ended up marrying. So it's fun to see his intricate plans.
That's amazing. Oh, well, you'll get to celebrate with them this weekend. That's really fun.
Yeah. And I celebrate, Melanie, that you've just crossed the milestone of 30 years of marriage. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Truly an amazing gift from God. And it seems unreal, but it has been so wonderful. And my husband and I both, we just went to Greece to celebrate. And we kept saying what a gift 30 years together is. And then the crazy thing is thinking that we could do 30 more. Being in our 50s, God could grant us 30 more, and we hope that he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And you all have been such a treasure to me to, even from a distance, to see how God has blessed your marriage and how you've continued to press through the hard times.
Yeah, definitely that has been a part of it. Lots of joys and lots of struggles. That's just how it goes. Yeah, but
That's life, right?
really. So, well, Laura, thank you so much. I'm really glad that I got to introduce you to some of my friends, and I think hopefully some of your friends also joined us. And you should be able to find this later, and we hope to save this and download so that it's available for future use if need be. But thank you guys for joining us today. And I really hope you'll go to Amazon and get this book and find a way to gather with some other single women, throw some married women in the mix there. And the study is only 6 weeks long. It's not a huge commitment, but it is 6 weeks packed with just a lot of Bible and a lot of encouraging stories. So I know that God will use it to greatly encourage you and also just greatly strengthen you for that surrender. So thank you again. I hope you guys have a great day. And Laura, enjoy the rest of your time at the beach.
Thank you, Melanie. This has been wonderful. Thank you all, whether you're live or will listen later. I'm so blessed to get to share with you all.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Bye, everyone.